Our next speaker is Jackie Barrett. So Jackie is the leading researcher at the LinkedIn flagship projects. If you guys don't know much about it, it's definitely worth researching and looking more into. It's a very exciting project that LinkedIn is doing. It's the World Economic Graph, where LinkedIn is mapping the workforce worldwide with the skill sets that are available as well as the jobs that are out there. It's a very exciting project led by LinkedIn, and I think one of your core projects as well, and we're very glad to have one of the core team members presenting it for us. So welcome, Jackie.
As Peter just mentioned, I'm going to be discussing some of the insights that you can garner from LinkedIn's economic graph. I'm Jackie Barrett. I'm a staff economic researcher at LinkedIn, and I've spent the past 2 years analyzing LinkedIn data and trying to garner labor market insights from that data. To give you a little bit more context on LinkedIn, it is the world's largest professional network on the internet. We have more than 546 million members in over 200 countries and territories. Professionals are joining at a rate of 2 new members every second, and more than 70% of our membership base is outside of the United States. So you can tell it's a very rich data set. As we've been seeing, between artificial intelligence and AI, skills gaps, and the rise of independent work, the global workforce is changing really rapidly. All these dynamics disrupt world's economies, and more importantly, the workers in these economies. Given the implication for our economies, countries, and the world, it's incumbent on all of us to try to understand how we're going to meet this challenge. That's where LinkedIn comes in. At LinkedIn, we're focused on creating economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, which includes all 3 billion members. As global workforce challenges widen, we believe our vision is more important than ever. LinkedIn started as a place to post your professional profile and connect with members of your professional community. Since then, it's become the largest professional community in the world. Our members today are actively helping each other and themselves search for jobs by sharing industry news, career advice, by learning new skills, by researching companies, and ultimately finding jobs. When we look at all these actions together, it has allowed us to develop the first economic graph. This economic graph is a map of the digital economy, and it spans 6 dimensions. Ultimately, as we continue to build this out, we hope to have a profile for every single member of the global workforce, a profile for every company, all of the jobs within these companies, the skills that are required to get these jobs, the schools and institutions that teach these skills, as well as all of the knowledge, professional knowledge that all these institutions have. In short, the economic graph is all the data on LinkedIn. It's a crystal ball for understanding what's happening in our global economy in real time throughout the community. It's a continuously updated digital representation of our members, companies, jobs, skills, schools, as well as profile updates. And because of the real-time nature, as well as the granularity that we have in it, it's become an important source of information for individuals, companies, governments, NGOs, to help them make important decisions on jobs, skills, and ultimately learning. Increasingly, global organizations like the World Bank and the World Economic Forum turn to us because our data can help them understand trends in a way that nobody else can. Our data is global, so you can easily compare it across various countries and regions. It's granular, so you are allowed to cut it down into industries, titles, skill sets, and it's real time. Members are constantly updating their profiles, so we can see trends emerge as they happen. And we also have historical data, so it allows us quickly to see how trends are emerging and how they compare to how things happened over time. My team takes this data and it has a 2-pronged approach in order to ultimately help address some of the challenges that we see in the workforce. First, we work with policy and influencers to uncover data insights that ultimately help them redesign their curriculums and give them recommendations to how to connect people to jobs. And secondly, we also work directly with workers in spaces such as the middle skilled space. I'm part of a cross-functional team that has 3 approaches. There's economic research, which describes the digital economy through LinkedIn data. There's data for impact, which takes these insights and applies them to help solve some of the labor market challenges that we have. And then there's also civic engagement, which creates pilot projects and partnerships in order to directly impact some of our target audiences. A little bit more about some of these groups. Through economic research, some of the projects that we've done is we have a real-time LinkedIn hiring rate, which allows us to see monthly how the labor force is changing. Some of the highlights of that is over the past year, it allowed us to see the acceleration in the economy in the United States and also to directly see what the impact of Brexit was in the UK. We also measure skills gaps. This allows us to see for the 50,000 skills that we have on our platform where we have abundances and shortages, and to connect with policymakers and educators to help address some of these differences between the two. And then we also have been measuring real-time migration, which allows us to cut migration data at a geography level as well as see who's contributing to that and the skill sets that they have. Some of the projects for data for impact, we've been working with the World Bank directly in order to understand entrepreneurial activity so that they can ultimately divert grant-making money to some of the locations that have some of the factors that predict entrepreneurial success. We've also been working with the National League of Cities in order to devise new curriculums. And then we also had the Kerala Migration Project in India, which as well devises new training curriculums in order to make sure that all the workers have jobs. Also have a couple of exciting projects in the civic engagement space. Skillful was a training finder product which helped workers discover various training programs as well as the salaries that were expected from completing these. Employment Pilot, that was an assessment where we partnered with the unemployment agencies in the state of Utah and gave them training to LinkedIn data and ultimately helped them reduce the amount of time that they were receiving unemployment insurance. And then LinkedIn Gigs, which is a common application so that workers can apply to multiple gig opportunities at the same time. With all these insights, I thought I'd give you a little bit more information on some of the ways that we're seeing the future of work changing. Recently, LinkedIn data was featured in the World Economic Forum Global Human Capital Report. Some of the trends that we have from there are, we noticed that human capital is changing over time. In particular, the degree specializations among different groups have changed significantly. In the past, people tended to focus on more general skills, such as economics or philosophy, and now tend to be specializing a little bit more in applied fields, such as marketing or computer science. We also see that different industries are hiring for different types of skills. So for instance, you see media, entertainment, as well as the public service sectors, they tend to be hiring a much broader range of skills than areas such as financial services, healthcare, or telecommunications, which tend to be focused on more specialized skill sets. So this matters because if you're looking for a job, you may want to determine the type of degree that you need in order to enter these fields. And it matters a lot depending on which area you want to go into. And then we also saw that cross-functional skills vary a lot depending on the stage you are in your career as well as the degree that you specialize in. So for instance, if you tend to be in IT, some of the soft skills that you may have are related to project management more so than leadership. Something else that we like to talk about is how the labor market is intrinsically skill-based. So rather than thinking about jobs in terms of job titles, we tend to think about them in terms of the collection of skills that comprise those job titles. This is an illustration from the 2006 World Economic Forum Human Capital Report, and you see the data analyst job title across two different industries. On the left, you see oil and energy, and on the right, you see market research. And as you can tell, the skills that comprise these two job titles are very, very different because there's a lot of specialization required for these fields. So rather than thinking about data analyst title as a whole and the skills that you need to get in order to have that job title, it's more informative to think about the skills needed for that particular job in that industry. So you can see petroleum, gas tend to be needed for oil and energy, while marketing research and customer insights tend to be more important for market research. Through our data, we can also see that skills have different cycles, which is important because when you think about human capital over the long run, you want to think about which skills you should be investing in and how long these skills are going to be durable for. So even in a short period that we've had the LinkedIn platform, you can see that Instagram and Snapchat have had very short cycles where they're relevant for a couple of years and then die down quickly. Whereas there are other skills that are emerging, such as deep learning, some that tend to be a little bit more stable, such as problem solving, and skills that have been declining over time, such as COBOL. As a worker or as somebody who's developing curriculum, I think it's important to make sure that students are investing in some of these stable skills and not over-indexing on some of the hype cycle skills, such as Snapchat, which aren't going to be relevant in the long term. Something else that we see is that many job titles have overlapping skill profiles. And this is important because it allows workers to get a sense for how they can easily transition from one area to another, especially as we tend to see that some of the jobs have become obsolete in the past few years. If you look on the left, you see data analyst skills and data scientist skills. There's a ton of overlap in the core skills that they have. For both of them, you need skills like data analysis, research, SQL, statistics. But as you start to move to the data scientist skills, you see skills that are a little bit more specialized, such as machine learning, MATLAB, data mining. I think it's also interesting that as you move from one to the other, you do see a huge increase in salaries as well. So sometimes it may be worth understanding the differences between job profiles and the expected salary from each of these things. Something else I thought would be particularly relevant to this group as well is that we've done a lot of research on gender. We were also featured in the World Economic Forum 2017 Global Gender Gap Report, and we found some interesting trends in our data. The first one is that, unfortunately, women represent fewer than 50% of leaders in every single industry. And in some of those fields, it's particularly bad. If you look at manufacturing, energy, or mining, leadership is actually less than 20% of leadership of women. Also, we found that the rate of progress for women has been slow. So over the past decade, the proportion of female leaders has increased by an average of just 2% across all those industries. That being said, there was some encouraging information that we found in this report. If you look across various industries, one thing that we found is that as you start to hire more women enter a given industry. So one of the quickest ways that you can have an impact on diversity is to start from the top, because that'll trickle down. Something else that we did is with the New York Times, we investigated profiles and determined what the factors were to becoming a CEO or C-suite executive. So some of the things that we found is that job switching frequently across different functions is actually associated with 3 additional years of work experience. We also found that location matters. So in the United States, if you go to places such as New York City, the chances of becoming an executive are much higher than going to Houston or Washington, D.C., while internationally, Mumbai and Singapore seem to provide a nice boost. And then finally, unfortunately, women who've had this exact same profile as men tend to need 3.5 more years of experience in order to reach the same level. So hopefully we see that changing over time. Another important lens of our data is the salary information that we've been collecting over the past year. This data allows us to provide greater transparency to our members on what the highest paying jobs are. as well as give a better idea of what people should be making in various industries to ultimately make sure that people are getting paid the appropriate amount. We looked at the 100 top paying jobs in the United States, and we found that unfortunately 19 out of 20 of them have men as the majority of people in that role. And then the one role where women were the majority was Senior VP of HR, which tends to be a role which attracts more women generally. Something else you can see is that when we looked at the jobs that had the least representation of women, the ones that are listed in this chart here, most of those tend to be in the tech fields. So, I mean, one thing that's encouraging here for me is to see a room full of women who are in data science, because I know that soon this number is going to be changing. So hopefully some of this information just provides a little bit more transparency for some of the statistics so that we can start to make progress in that direction. I'll leave you with our website, which can give you a little bit more information about the economic graph and the research that we're doing over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.